of the Wisconsin Book Festival, Saturday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on CSpan 2's Book TV.
Washington Journal continues.
We want to welcome to our table Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager for Trump presidential campaign and co-author of a book, Let Trump Be Trump, the inside story of his rise to the presidency. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
So what is your role in the midterm elections in 2020?
Well, I serve as a senior advisor to the Vice President's Political Action Committee called the Great America Committee. And informally, I spend some time with the President and the Vice President traveling around the country and trying to encourage them to go out and tout their successes so that the people can see what's been accomplished in the first 2 years of this administration.
And what do you think they should be talking about on the campaign trail?
You know, I think back to the mid-90s and George Stephanopoulos and James Carville when they said, it's the economy, stupid. And if you look at where we are today from where we were just 2 short years ago, we're at 3.7% unemployment. We've created 4 million new jobs. We've seen Hispanic and African American unemployment at the lowest in recorded history. So the question you should ask yourself, in my opinion, is, am I better off today than I was 2 years ago? And if it's a measure of economic security, I think unequivocally the answer is yes. If it's a measure of national security, I think the answer is yes. I think if it's a measure of homeland security, meaning is our border safer, stronger, better today than it was 2 years ago, then the answer is yes. If you like the direction of the country, then I think in just under 4 weeks you should go and vote and return the Republicans to the majority so they can continue on that path moving forward.
Where is the president and Republicans, where are they vulnerable in November?
Well, I think they're vulnerable probably on the fact of they haven't finalized the completion of the wall, which has been a significant campaign promise that the president made. There is some money already in the budget for the building of the wall on the southern border, but it hasn't been finalized yet. And I also think the issue of purchasing health care across state lines is a campaign promise that the president has made, but is not fully fulfilled yet. They've stepped in the right direction, but those are two significant things in the first 2 years of the administration that they want to accomplish. They just haven't been able to do it just yet.
The president writes an op-ed in USA Today on Medicare. The Senate Democrats and the Senate Republican leaderships yesterday during their weekly news conferences up on Capitol Hill both start out with the issue of health care and what their parties want to do on it. What are your polls showing you about that issue and how it could impact the 2018 vote?
Well, health care is a very important thing. And if you remember, the notion of what they commonly refer to as Obamacare was something that Barack Obama campaigned on and was really the preeminent success of his first 2 years in office. It took place in about February, March of his second year in office is when they had complete control over the House and the Senate. The Democrats were in control. And what the Republicans have now done is gotten rid of what they call the individual mandate, meaning you're required to purchase health care if you want to not be penalized by the government. That being said, I think we can do a lot better. I think there are people who are on the exchange, meaning they have to go through the Obamacare system to get health care that don't have great options. I think there are people who can't afford to go through Obamacare. So do I think that health care is an important factor? Absolutely, I do. Do I think that people should have the opportunity to buy it across state lines? Of course they should. Do I think that it is something that every American should have? Absolutely. But you can't make it so it is so expensive that individuals who are trying to make a living have to make a choice between putting food on their table and purchasing health care for their families. That's not a fair choice for them to make. So we should find a way that everybody is covered. I'm not saying universal health care. I'm not saying individual health. I'm not saying it's a system like Great Britain has. But what I am saying is health care should be affordable by everybody so that, barring a catastrophe, you can take your family to well visits and to have checkups on a regular basis so that you can make sure you have a healthy lifestyle for the long-term cost of the system.
Are you concerned about the president's poll numbers? This Newsweek headline, Donald Trump's approval rating has dropped in every state. President Trump's approval rating has dropped in every state since he was inaugurated, and in 3 states it fell from at least 50% to majority disapproval, according to a new poll. How can the president rally the base for Republicans in the midterms to keep the Senate and the House with those numbers?
Well, the Rasmussen survey, which was out last week, has them at 51% as opposed to some lower number. And look, I would caution any of your listeners, any of your watchers, to believe the prognosticators. I lived this for for 2 years where they told us Donald Trump would never be a real candidate, he would never run for office, he couldn't win a primary. He won 38 primaries and received more votes than any candidate in the history of the Republican Party, and he went on to beat Hillary Clinton. And if you remember election morning of 2016, I remember it very vividly, every major media outlet from the LA Times to the New York Times to, you name it, said Donald Trump's chances of winning are approaching zero. And today, he's the president of the United States. So I would caution listeners, I would caution readers from believing too much in the polls. When I look back, the poll that was the most accurate, I believe, was Investors Business Daily, the IBD poll, which showed that at the time, on Election Day 2016, Donald Trump was going to win by 2 or 3 percentage points. And that was a historical trend. And what I would say to people who are watching is, go to Real Clear Politics. Look at the trend of not just any one snapshot of a poll, but the trend of where things have been historically. And remember, many people, for whatever reason, when they're polled, don't say that they're supporting Donald Trump. But when they go into the ballot box and they have the opportunity in the sanctity of that location, they vote for Donald Trump and the policies that he's supporting. At least they did 2 years ago. And I think you'll see more of that coming up.
Are you concerned, though, that in a midterm, when he's not on the ballot, they're not voting for Donald Trump, and that there could be, as there have been in previous cycles, people wanting more checks and balances? In other words, they want the other party to control Congress.
Well, the historical precedence is that under Barack Obama's first midterm election, he lost 63 seats in the House. Bill Clinton lost 54 seats. The anomaly to that was George W. Bush, and by and large, that was because of the 9/11 tragedy that took place. And so the country was very unified and thought that it was important to keep the members of the electorate who were in place there. But here's what I think. The Republicans currently hold a 23-seat majority. I think there are 3 seats in the House that they will increase. So really, I give them a 26-seat majority right now, even though the real number is 23. That being said, you have to look at the individual districts. Donald Trump was in Erie, Pennsylvania yesterday. He's traveled the country. The vice president's traveled the country campaigning for specific members of Congress who are in those tough re-elections. And those individuals that are embracing the Trump-Pence agenda, I think, going to do very, very well. Those who are running away from the Trump-Pence agenda, those members of Congress who are saying, we want to keep our distance from President Trump and Vice President Pence, are going to have a harder time at the ballot box. And when you look at the U.S. Senate, there's a 51-49 majority for the Republicans right now. I could very much envision a place where there are 5 new Republican members of the U.S. Senate. When you look at some of the races that are taking place, that could mean that's a 56-44 majority for the Republicans. Now, and that would include, obviously, keeping the 2 very competitive seats, one in Nevada and one in Arizona. But if that were to occur, the Republicans, because of the way the map is, the fact that 10 Democrat incumbents are in states running for re-election that Donald Trump won, some by as many as 40 points, gives the Republicans an opportunity in this cycle to expand their majorities in the Senate.
Before we get to those calls, those 5 states.
Look, I think North Dakota first and foremost. I think Montana is an opportunity, Indiana is an opportunity, Missouri is an opportunity, and then I would say there's a toss-up between New Jersey, Florida, and probably West Virginia. Those 3, I think, are toss-ups, and it could go either way. But I think you've got candidates in both of in those 3 locations that could win if they break towards the Republicans. I think the other 4 are fairly well along, where they have the opportunity to win those seats if the election continues to go in the direction it's going.
So, in addition to your political work, are you also representing clients?
Look, this is the amazing thing. You know what I've become? This is the greatest thing. I've become an author. So I have no clients. I don't lobby. This is the greatest misnomer in the world. Everybody says, Corey Lewandowski sells influence. I don't sell influence. I don't have clients. I don't lobby. I do? I write books. And I've got a great book coming out November 27th. It's called Trump's Enemies. And it's going to talk about the people and those inside the administration that are trying to thwart the president's agenda, whether they're in various government agencies or they are part of the administration. And the reason for the book, when I look back at what Bob Woodward wrote, he wrote about individual staffers inside the West Wing who were removing things from the Resolute desk. To me, that should constitute high crimes and misdemeanors, because the American people didn't vote for the staff. They voted for the president and the vice president to go and move their agenda forward. And when individuals in the building think that's their duty and or obligation to take things off the president's desk, to me, I think that's a real problem. And the book that I have written with my co-author, Dave Bossie, is going to talk about the fact that there are individuals in the government who are subverting the president's agenda and his agenda of America first and making America great again, which is what the American people voted for.
Any ideas of who wrote that piece in the Washington Post?
You know, it's the New York Times.
The New York Times, thank you.
It's very interesting. I don't know. I asked the president about it directly. And what he said was, the qualification of a senior government official or senior administration official is, I think, how they couch that person. Mm-hmm. There are 1,000 people that qualify. He may or may not even know the individual, but what we saw from the New York Times, and I think Dean Baguette said this, they had to verify the authenticity of the individual, meaning if it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders or John Kelly or a well-known official, they wouldn't have to authenticate who that individual is. They know who that person is just by the way of their position. So this to me is probably a person who works in a government agency somewhere who feels it's their duty and or obligation to protect the American people from the president and thwart the will of the 60 million people who voted for Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And so I think this was a low-level staffer who decided they wanted to make news but didn't have the courage to come out in front of the cameras and have their conversation.
Let's get to calls. We'll go
Please.
to Wayne, who's in Hanover, Pennsylvania, Democrat. Hi, Wayne.
Hey, how you doing, Greta? Look, Corey, that man has, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I ain't got much time, but I'm going to say it to you the way I see it. That man has lied from the day he was running to right to this point. I have no regard for him or Pence, and I'm sorry. I just pray to my Lord Jesus that the Democrats get in. This is ridiculous the way this country's being run, and by him mostly. That's my opinion.
And Wayne, so, what? It's your opinion. What has the president lied about? Give an example.
Okay. Oh, you ready? What has he lied about? Oh, we're not going to touch Social Security. We're not going to touch Medicare. We're going to make it stronger. We're not going to take away disabilities. That's just three things I can think of right off, and there's many more. And then turns around the Republicans, and I'm not saying him only. Well, he says that, and the Republicans say they're going to take this, do that, do this, because of the debt. Yeah, I know we got a heck of a debt. And yet listen now, Greta, please. He wants to say there's no global warming. What about these storms? Where's this money going to go to? And yet, only thing I agree with Trump said one thing very, very nice. You know what that is? He don't want to see Jerome Powell keep putting the interest up. That makes sense. That's the only thing I say he did good.
Okay, all right, Wayne. A few things
Wayne,
there.
let me say this. I was not a Barack Obama supporter when he ran for office. I supported Mitt Romney, and prior to that, John McCain. But I love my country, and I think you do too, Wayne. And what we want is we want America to be strong again. We want America to be unapologetic again. And we want to reassert our dominance on the world stage because we are the greatest country in the world. And what I think this president has had the opportunity to do over the first 2 years of his administration, less than 2 years, is to reassert through the United Nations, through our ambassador Nikki Haley, who's now leaving. She's done a phenomenal job, through his travel across the world, to reassert our dominance as the most important global power. And look, I didn't support Barack Obama, but I wanted him to be successful because I want my country to be successful. And when I look back on what Donald Trump and his administration has been able to accomplish over the first almost 2 years, we've seen unemployment drop to historic low levels. We've seen African American, Hispanic unemployment drop to the lowest levels in recorded history. And that's a good thing. Now, is there more work to do? Of course there is. But what I say is, let's give him the opportunity to continue on the path forward of creating jobs, over 4 million new jobs created. Let's give him the opportunity to reassert our dominance and to draw those red lines in the sand when our enemies, like Bashar al-Assad, are using chemical weapons against innocent men, women, and children. There will be a response from the United States. There will be a response from our allies to make sure that they understand that that is unacceptable behavior. And that's something that I think all Americans can agree on, because I don't think any dictator should use weapons against innocent men, women, and children. And this president has said he won't tolerate it, and he will join with our allies around the world, whether it's Poland or Great Britain or France and others, to go in and prevent that from continuing to happen. So could we have our differences? Of course we can. But from an economic side, we're a country that's growing now. The Atlanta Federal Reserve says we're going to grow at 4.7%. And I remember just 2 short years ago when the average growth rate for our country was 1.2%. And we're fighting in a global marketplace. We're fighting countries like China, who are subsidizing their companies to dump their products in our soil, and they were growing at 8%, and we were growing at 1.2%. China's in a very different position now because this president's taken a hard line on them, and that's good for America and American jobs.
All right, let's hear from Gary, who's in Connorsville, Indiana, Democrat.
Morning, Greta and
Morning.
Mr. Lewandowski. Quick points, I'll try to breeze through it. You mentioned Mr. Trump's declining support, and that might sound encouraging for Democrats, but there's just one problem. Who's going to run against him? I've yet to see a strong candidate that might prove to be a formidable opponent. And as far as the campaign and voting, I would like to say that I think it's a shame and a tragedy nowadays when people vote, and that's people that do vote. They're not trying to vote somebody in as much as they're just trying to keep somebody out. And the last thing I want to say is that I'm sick and tired of people saying that Republicans are out to destroy this country. That is a vast misconception. We're trying to make things right in the way we see fit. That's all we're trying to do. There's nothing substantial about that line of thinking. I'm sorry, but that's all I'd like to say. Thank you, everybody.
All right, Gary. All right.
You know, Gary, you're exactly right on a couple important points. You know, who the Democrats are going to nominate, we don't know, but it's going to be a very lively discussion on the left. And you will likely have, you know, U.S. senators and governors, and potentially from your state, Gary, in Indiana, the mayor of South Bend is someone who many people are talking about as a potential candidate for the presidency. But in addition to that, you know, I think Michael Bloomberg is a very serious candidate, a man who has accumulated enormous wealth and was the mayor of New York City. So we'll have a lively discussion, and that's how democracy works. But to Gary's point, it's very true, and I hear it all the time. It's the lesser of two evils that people go into the ballot box to vote for. And that's such a sad thing, because we have such an amazing country. We have people who have American success stories, people who only in this country could have achieved the things that they've achieved. And we're the greatest country in the world. And we should put our leaders up and give them the opportunity to tell us what they want to achieve, and not vote for the lesser of two evils, but vote for the best person for the job.
Well, on that point, the president right now is on the phone with Fox and Friends, and here's a tweet. He just said he would welcome running against any of the rumored possible Democratic 2020 candidates, and adds, I hope we don't get any star or good thinker coming out of nowhere. So is Michael Bloomberg, though, a viable challenger to the president? Do you think that he could give the president a challenge?
Well, I think so, and I'll tell you why. You know, Mayor Bloomberg ran the largest city in our country, New York City, with about 8 million people. He put $100 million into his own campaign. His name recognition is very high, and he's a man of enormous wealth. I mean, he's worth north of, you know, $20 billion. So by just definition, that gives him the ability to bypass the standard process of going out and raising money in small increments or putting together a super PAC to go and make his positions known. And he's progressive enough that the Democrats will support his ideas. He's very much for gun control. He's very much for gay marriage, and that's perfectly fine. And that's the issues that the Democratic Party wants to put a litmus test on. So that being said, he doesn't clearly have a clear path, because I think you'll see Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and many, many others, and Bernie Sanders potentially, who want to get into that race to talk about the issues that they think are the most important. But we've seen this story. You know, middle America, what many people call the flyover states. The Democratic Party, unfortunately, has given up on some of them. They've given up on those middle states of the hardworking men and women, and they've become a party that's bi-coastal on the far left and the far right of the country, the Massachusetts and Californias, and that's not a way to win an election. And look, I've been here, I lived through it. They said Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, and which is absolutely true. But it's not who wins the popular vote. See, I'm a football fan, and I get this quarterback, his name's Tom Brady. He's my quarterback because I'm a New England Patriots guy. It's not how many yards Tom Brady threw for in a given game, because he throws for 400, 500, or 600 yards in a game. It's how many points did you put on the board. And the way to win the presidency is through the Electoral College, and you have to get 270 electoral votes. And so for Democrats to understand that, they have to go and campaign in places where they have historically forgotten. And states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, all the places that Donald Trump won, he didn't get 270 votes. This wasn't the hanging Chad in Florida that allowed him to win. He got 307 votes to Hillary Clinton's 232. And that's such an enormous victory that people don't talk about. He actually could have lost the entire state of Florida and still been elected president, how decisive his victory was. So the Democrats, I think, have some work to do in middle America if they're going to be successful.
Let's hear from Juliet, who's in Colorado, a Republican. Hi, Juliet. You're on the air with Corey Lewandowski.
Good morning.
Morning, Juliet.
Good morning. I called to talk about health care. My name is Juliet McLean, and I do have a book out on the market on this very subject.
What's it called,
now,
Juliet?
Corey made a point, and I should say my book's been on the market since 2009.
We have to update your book, Juliet. What's it called?
It's called Purpose-Driven Thieves. And the book has been on the market long before Donald Trump ever was even thought of for president of the United States. So that's not the issue here. I'm not now trying to ride on somebody's skirt tails like Donald Trump is now riding on Obama's skirt tails. But let's make this clear. My book is about single-payer health care. My book is the only book on the market that you can buy that includes costs. And I gave a free copy to Congress. So because congressmen haven't touched it, congressmen in Washington, D.C., because they didn't know what it was going to cost. Let's face facts. Well, it's been in my book for years, so I gave them a free copy. So I don't want to hear from any congressman. We don't know what it's going to cost. Or I also don't want to hear from congressmen who've recently been traipsing up here on top of this mountain to tell us all it's going to cost too much money. I've called them bold-faced liars right to their face.
Okay, let's take the point about single payer.
Look, I think we've seen this in a number of countries, developed countries around the world, and it doesn't work. And my concern is we are the most economically strong country in the world. And our people, I don't want to say have a right to health care, but deserve health care. Their families deserve it. We need to do better. Congress needs to do better. And what that entails, but is not limited to, is purchasing health care across state lines. You know, I can buy my car insurance from any carrier that I want to. I can buy my home insurance from any carrier I want to. But I live in the state of New Hampshire. So my options for health care for me and my family of 4 children is very limited. And if we open that marketplace up, the free market works. What does it matter if I want to purchase my health care from a company that is a provider in California or a company that's a provider in Nebraska? Let's give everybody the opportunity to do that. Competition, in my opinion, works. It lowers the cost. Look, it's like airfare. You don't have to buy from JetBlue or American Airlines or Delta. You can shop what you want to. And if one is cheaper than the other and the basic product is the same, you can choose what you want to. In healthcare, we should have that same opportunity. And I don't think we have it right now. And I think it's a system that by and large benefits the big healthcare companies, whether that's Blue Cross, Blue Shield, or whoever it is. They have a monopoly by and large in some of these states. And I think opening that up to competition and letting people choose where they get their health care is a good thing for everybody.
And you think that would the alternative to so-called Obamacare is opening it up across state lines.
I hope so, and it's something the president campaigned on, and I think it's something he wants to fulfill, and we need Congress to do that. You know, it's not that hard to do, to open it up across state lines. The people that don't want that to happen are the individual companies that have a monopoly in their respective states. So if you're in California and you've got a monopoly in California, you don't want somebody else coming in and vice versa, but it's good for the American people.
All right, let's go to Georgia. Lindsay's in Waycross, Georgia, Republican.
No, I'm not a Republican. I'm independent.
Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Regardless. The fact is, what really is bothering me is the mandate has not really been removed. You can ask anybody that does your taxes for you, and they'll tell you it still exists. And when we do our taxes this time, if you don't have health insurance, you will be fined. That work has not been done. They talk about it. You know, they want people to believe that they've done it, but they haven't. Just like a lot of other things. They're good at talking, but no real action, and they're very good at lying.
So, Lindsay, how are you going to vote then in November?
I'm voting for a Democrat this time. Okay? Georgia is a red state. They vote Republicans in, but we're a very poor state, and we also get no help. You know, all of our money seems to go to Atlanta or something. I live in a very poor county in Georgia, and we're forgotten about. Yeah, we're part of the flyover state, you know, and we help put these people in. Georgians help put them in, but they continue to lie to us. So I'm
Lindsay,
afraid this year they're not going to be a total red state.
Okay.
Georgia, I hope, flips.
Okay. So Corey Lewandowski, she's upset with the mandate. She doesn't like the mandate. So she doesn't sound like she likes Obamacare. Yet at the same time, Republicans haven't gotten rid of it. So she's not going to vote for Republicans.
Well, first and foremost, you know, Lindsay, I hope you and your family and everyone in Georgia is going to be safe from that terrible hurricane that just came through, Hurricane Michael, because it's come through Georgia as well. And I know there is a number of people who are going to be infected by that. But in addition to that, Lindsay's absolutely right. We need to do better. Our elected officials need to do better. They need to fulfill the promises that they've made, and that's not an unreasonable thing to ask for. You know, when people run for office and they outline what their agenda is, and they say that this is what they're going to come to Washington to do, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, there should be accountability for that. And that's how the system works. And every 2 years, we have this great thing called an election. And we hold people accountable. Whether they are successful and not successful, there should be accountability. And I think the issue of health care is a very, very important one. But it's one of many. And I know what my health care costs are because I've got a family of 4 children who are all young, who every time they sneeze, I think, are at the doctor's. And I pay the copay, and the next thing you know, I get a bill 2 weeks later for the difference between what my insurance covers and it's a fortune. And the average person can't afford it anymore, and it's not fair. It's not fair to people who have to make the decision whether they want to put food on their table or take care of their children at the doctor. It's not fair for people who have pre-existing conditions. They should have the right to the best medical care. It's not fair to our veterans, and what this administration did, which I think often gets overlooked, is if you're a veteran and you have a DD-214, which is your papers that say that you served our country, and you want to go get health care anywhere because the VA is too backed up, you now have the ability to do that. That is a significant change, and it's something we should have done a long time ago. The VA system has been so backed up and so broken for so long that our veterans haven't had access to health care. This administration has now changed that. But everybody in the greatest country in the world should have the ability to go and make sure their children's health and their own health is secure and safe, and preventative care is so important. The annual checkups so that the doctors can come and tell you what's taking place. And one of the best ways to do that is to provide affordable health care by purchasing health care across state lines. And that's what we should hold Congress accountable to make sure they're implementing.
All right, let's go to Jerry, who's in Huntington Beach, California, a Democrat.
It's early there.
Yes, it is. We get early calls. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, we're a 24/7 state, but anyway, I find most of the guest comments somewhere between funny and absurd. But he makes his living spending things to the Republicans' advantage. That's okay. Everybody has to have their career. But Anyway, let me take one of his claims here that the economy is so much better under Trump. Trump is very good at taking credit for that. I remind him that when Obama took over, the economy was on a tailspin. Everything was going wrong, and slowly but surely, the economy started to pick up, and we had low unemployment, we had growth, we had all the good things you want in the economy. And now that's just continuing, and this clown in the White House is taking all the credit for it. Well, he can spend it all he wants, but the truth is it's because of what happened before Trump got in office, not since Trump took over. So that's the fact.
Okay, Jerry, let's take that point.
Actually, Jerry, that's not the fact. Under Barack Obama, the average growth rate was 1.2%. That was the growth rate, the GDP, and unemployment was nowhere near the historic lows of 3.7%. There weren't 4 million new jobs created. And at some point, you have to understand what the reality is. You can blame George W. Bush for the bad economy, and that's what Barack Obama inherited. But at some point, you have to understand that for the 8 years he's in office, he makes decisions which impact the outcome of the economy. So you can say that when he came into office, the economy was in a tailspin, which may be true because it was a fairly large recession taking place, probably the largest recession that we've had since the Great Depression. But 6 years later, the economy, when Barack Obama was leaving office, was growing at 1.2 or 1.3%. That was the new normal. And his position was, how is Donald Trump going to create all these new jobs? Does he have a magic wand? Today, 4 million new jobs created. The stock market is up 17% since Election Day. The growth rate of our country is now north of 4%. So, you can't have it both ways.
What policies, though, did this president put in place?
Look, the tax cuts was the single biggest benefit to individuals and companies, because their tax rate, if you're in the highest tax bracket, you were paying 40% of your earned income in taxes. Today you're paying 32%. You know what that 8% difference means? It means companies have the opportunity to reinvest into growing their company, creating new jobs, creating long-term capital dividends for their employees. Look, Walmart, Walgreens, Amazon have gone on a hiring spree since Donald Trump has come into office, because they now have the consumer confidence because of the tax cuts that Donald Trump and this Congress have passed, to understand that the long-term benefit. Look, in the world, and I'm not a CPA, the CPAs used to say, defer, defer, defer. Take your income and defer it, defer it, defer it. Now they're saying you don't need to defer it anymore, because the tax rate is so advantageous for everybody that whether you're a W-2 employee or you have an LLC, or you are a single practitioner, you're a plumber, you're an electrician, whatever it is, you have more money in your pocket today, which gives you more opportunity to hire more people because of the tax cuts that this president put in place. That, coupled with the deregulation. This president came into office and he said very simply, for every one new government regulation, I'm going to cut 2. Well, he didn't fulfill that promise. For every one new government regulation that was put in place, he cut 22. That meant tens of millions of dollars of deregulation on small business owners from an overburdensome government to give them the ability to go and expand their business. And we have seen that now at historic levels. And, to Jerry's point, I fundamentally disagree that Barack Obama created millions of new jobs, and the statistics out of the Federal Reserve do not show that we were growing at 4.3 and 4.4%, which we are now growing at. And the statistics do not show that African American and Hispanic unemployment are at the lowest levels ever under the Obama administration, as they are today under the Trump administration.
Let's go to Hillsdale, New Jersey. Edwin, a Republican. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Lewandowski, I actually wanted to call you to thank you for helping Trump win the election. It's a really silly story, but I'm a retired teacher with a doctorate in early education. And every week I used to give my fruits.
Okay, you know what, Edwin, I'm gonna move on, because the feedback of the people around you, it's very difficult to hear your question.
Thank you for your service, Edwin, to the public school system and to being a teacher. It is one of the most difficult jobs there is. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll go on to Kimberly, who's in Washington, Pennsylvania, Republican. Hi, Kimberly.
Good morning, Greta. Hi, Mr. Lewandowski. I appreciate you helping Mr. Trump. I wanted to, educate, but I'd like the people in the country to realize that Donald Trump is one man up against a whole bunch of corruption. So if you're all mad about what's not getting done, then you can look to the people that, who have been there for 20, 30, 50 years. And, you're going to have to just drain the swamp because there's a lot of people on the take. There's a lot of reasons why things are not changing. There's a lot of reasons why, they say one thing and do another. I'd suggest to watch the Veritas episodes. It's very, very enlightening.
Okay, well, Kimberly, let me ask you, Corey Lewandowski, has the president done a good job of draining the swamp?
The president Donald Trump came to Washington, D.C. as a complete change agent. And he has fundamentally disrupted the way Washington works, and I love it, and I think the American people love it. I tell this story often, but during the transition, after he was elected and before he was inaugurated, the president received a phone call from the president of Taiwan, and she called to say congratulations. And there were a number of people from the State Department, Foggy Bottom as we like to refer to it, and they said, Mr. President-elect, you cannot accept the call from the president of Taiwan. We don't recognize Taiwan as a country because of our diplomatic relationship with China. And he said, hold on a second. I can't say hello to the president of Taiwan? Absolutely not, sir. It will throw the world into a tailspin. And he said, picked up the phone and said, hello. Because he does things differently. Because for 30 years or more, we have had bureaucrats and unelected officials driving our country in the wrong direction. And Donald Trump has come to change that. Maybe the best instance of that, the best example, might be the fact that he met with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. No American leader has ever met with a leader of North Korea. And now, that meeting took place about 4 months ago. And what we've seen since that time is not one nuclear test has continued. Not one missile has gone into the air. The world is safer. We're denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. Is it finished? No. Are we getting our remains back of American citizens who were left behind during the Korean conflict? Absolutely. Is that a value? You bet it is. And so he is taking our foreign policy and our domestic policy in a different direction. And I think it is so needed because for 30 years, our country has, unfortunately, and our bureaucrats have done exactly the same thing, and it hasn't worked. So let's try something different. And if it doesn't work, they have the ability to go back to the ballot box in 2 years in November and put things back to the way they were if they don't think it was successful. But what we're seeing is the resurgence of America. America first, jobs being created, the economy growing, and our friends and our allies around the world thanking us for our global leadership once again.
Let's hear from Mike, who's our last call here. Laurel Park, New York, a Democrat.
Yeah, hi, Greta. I'm stunned at CSpan to have this man on. He's just spitting out lie after lie. Nobody respects us. And as far as the economy goes, when Obama got the economy, U.S. economy just lost trillions of dollars in home ownership. What our homes were worth, stock market. It took 8 years to get that back. The economy was he just passed a $2-point-something trillion tax cut. That's what it's going to end up being. And 80% of it went to super wealthy and corporations. It's going to wear off in six months. He's broken the FBI, CIA. Soon, when the Mueller report comes out and you find out about all the money shenanigans he's been playing in the Alpha Bank, I mean, it's going to be falling down within 6 months. They're going to want to kick this guy out of office. Thanks a lot.
All right, Mike, I'll leave it there. Corey Lewandowski, are you worried about the special counsel investigation?
Look, I'm more worried of what we have now seen from the leadership at the FBI, from Jim Comey to Andy McCabe to Jim Baker, who was the general counsel, right down to Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. We have seen the most, I can't even describe it. You couldn't write this story as a spy novel, that the senior leadership of the premier law enforcement agency in the country had an insurance policy and spying on American citizens through what's called a FISA warrant through the FISA court to spy on American citizens on domestic soil because they were part of an opposing political party. This is what takes place in third world dictatorships. And Andy McCabe and Rod Rosenstein at the Justice Department, and Peter Orr, whose wife Nellie was working for Fusion GPS, that took the false dossier and swore to it. There's been no accountability whatsoever. The American people deserve better. Jim Comey was fired. Andy McCabe was fired. Jim Baker was fired. Peter Strzok was fired. Lisa Page resigned. You know, these individuals with the highest levels of the FBI. And this story is not over yet. And when the Inspector General Horowitz has his report, and he is referring criminal indictments against the Deputy Director of the FBI, that should give every American pause of not only were these people spying on American citizens, they were doing it with a badge, and they were doing it legally. And that should give great pause to every American who should be concerned that if they can do this to a candidate running for President of the United States and his staff, they can do it to anybody.
Have you been contacted by Robert Mueller or those part of anyone associated with this special counsel investigation?
I've been very candid. I've testified in front of the House committee on 2 occasions. I've testified in front of the Senate committee, and I've been very candid. Look, I left the campaign in June.
House and Senate Intelligence Committees?
The House and Senate Intelligence Committee, and I left the campaign in June. And what took place after I left seems to be the focus of their investigation. So I don't know if that's fortuitous or lucky or whatever it is, but no one seems to care what I think, and that's perfectly fine, because what I know is I didn't communicate with any Russians. I didn't coordinate with any Russians. I didn't collude with any Russians. What I know is when I was at the campaign, to the best of my knowledge, nobody did that. And I have said this so many times. If anybody, regardless of party, attempted to materially impact the outcome of an election through illicit means, I hope that person or those people go to jail for the rest of their lives, because our democracy is too sacred to allow that to happen. Whether they're Republicans or Democrats, whether they worked for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, if they tried to do something to impact the outcome of this election, the last election, or a future election, they should go to jail forever.
So do you believe that Donald Trump Jr. handled the emails that he got saying that they had dirt on Hillary Clinton? Did he handle that properly?
Look, I think what Donald Trump Jr. wanted to do was he got an email that said, we have information on Hillary Clinton. And he wanted to know what that information was, because he wanted to help the campaign to the best of his ability. That's not unlike what anybody else would try and do. That being said, Hillary Clinton has been such a public figure in our country for the better part of 20, 25 years. I don't think there was ever a silver bullet that was out there that said, if we only had this one additional piece of information, this will sink her campaign. I don't think that existed. I don't think it exists today. Everybody knows who Hillary Clinton is. The American people know exactly who she is and what she believes in. So I don't think there was this, this piece of information that was so secret. That being said, I was never part of those meetings that he had with Russians. And if it were asked of me, I would have recommended against it, and I would have referred it to our campaign council to make a recommendation on if the meeting should have ever occurred.
Corey Lewandowski, author of the book Let Trump Be Trump, The Inside Story of His Rise in the Presidency, and a new book out coming in November, Trump's Enemies. Thank you for the conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will open up the phone lines and get your thoughts on any public policy, politics issue. There they are on your screen. Republicans, Democrats, Independents. We'll be right back with those calls. But first, during the final Tennessee U.S. Senate debate from the University of Tennessee in